You are listening to Revealing Real Estate Podcast, where we dive into getting over your fear of taking risk in real estate and making money while you sleep. I'm Nico Pedizano, your host and real estate guru with over 20 years of experience. It's time to get real. We have a wonderful show today. I really thrive on educating and teaching people how to build a team around you. And I'm not talking about a real estate team where I have agents that work under my team. I'm talking about surrounding yourself when you're making, or transacting within real estate. There's many components or many moving parts into building that team. And one of those individuals is a gentleman named Paul Mazzeo from Mazzeo Law. And I want to welcome Paul to the show. Paul, welcome to Revealing Real Estate Podcast.
Thank you very much, Nick. Thanks for having me here today.
Yeah, no problem. And a lot of that is making sure, I always have, I have a good accountant, in my team. I have very good contractors. I am a real estate agent, so I don't need a real estate agent, of course. I have a good mortgage or somebody who's going to find me money and leverage money or allow me to leverage money through many different aspects of finding money, whether through private lending. But a really big component to transacting in real estate is making sure that you have a very good lawyer who's going to be there to back you up, I would say, in a sense, to make sure that there's nothing that can legally go wrong through a real estate transaction. So I want to get into that and share that kind of back-end knowledge of what it's like for a real estate lawyer once the deal gets removed from our hands as real estate agents, and then passes it on to you as a lawyer, because my hands are done. After a deal is done for me, my hands are pretty much washed up, right? And then it's and I tell people all the time, I said, once the deal goes firm and we submit that deal to the lawyer, I think at that point, it's pretty much in the lawyer's hands. Now, we'll guide through the process. But first and foremost, Paul, I think it's important that we let our listeners know or understand how you got into the real estate or family law business, because you do both. You do real estate law and you do family law. So maybe you could give us some insight what made you want to get into the business and how you got into that business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I became a lawyer in 2009, if we're going to go all the way back. And it was many years before that I knew that this was my calling and this is what I wanted to do. I learned when I started practicing, I was practicing for two sole practitioners who did a bunch of different areas of law, family law being one, real estate being another, construction lien, commercial litigation, different types of practice areas. And I had the benefit of a wide lens of exposure and learning my first couple of years of my career as a lawyer. I started Mazzeo Law in 2011. And when I initially started the firm, I thought I was going to approach it in the same way and offer a wide variety of service for my clients. Ultimately, I figured out that as a fresh-faced 28-year-old, it was hard to attract corporate commercial clients and clients in some of those different practice areas. And so my practice focused on almost exclusively family law for, I want to say, 2011 until 2014 or 15. And then it was at that point that I introduced the real estate practice, which is now part of my firm, a predominant part of my law firm. And that was something that I was always interested in from the get-go. I just had to make sure that I approached it at the right time for myself, because it does require a lot of people at the office. When you got a real estate practice going on, it's very busy, and so you need a lot of hands.
Yeah, I can imagine mixing up the family law with the real estate law. There's a lot of moving parts to that.
Right, and they're very different as practice areas, and so I had to make sure that I could build out a proper infrastructure before I really tackled it and took it on as a practice area and a service that our law firm provided. So that happened by 2014 and 15, and it just coincided with a rapid rise in our real estate market that we experienced from, even beginning before those years, but those years through to more recently. And so, gradually we came busier and busier, and now we're fairly well known for both of those areas of practice, which is a great thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I see your name around quite often, and there's a lot of good feedback regarding your firm and the type of service you guys offer. I know firsthand that for the people that have dealt with you through clients that have used your firm, you guys really actually make that extra step to or go that extra mile for the client, and that's important, because I think that nowadays that's been lost in practice, and not just in law firms. I just think in business in general, and I believe that this shift in the market, will allow people to come back and provide that service for that client and be there for them, and I know that about you. But so, how many people right now you got on your team in your law firm?
We have a team of 9, and that's 4 lawyers plus admin staff, a total of 9 people.
9 people.
Yes.
Nice. So when a deal gets done, right, and it's from a lawyer's perspective, from a real estate perspective, right, and we submit the deal to you guys. We ask the client, we have our protocols, we have our systems in place, because everybody's gonna need a lawyer to transact. Everybody needs a lawyer to close that deal.
Right.
Right. So what happens if you can just kind of give us a little kind of step by step of what happens through that process when a deal is been provided to you guys?
Yeah, and like you said at the beginning, it does take a village, and so we work together with the realtors, with the mortgage lenders, whether it be institutional or otherwise, through broker or directly with banking institutions, and so the starting point for us really is getting a firm deal, and once we've got a firm deal, that's the starting point for us, and then we do our file opening, identifying our client if it's a client that's new to the firm. An engagement letter so that the client is made aware of the fees associated, the out-of-pocket expense disbursements, we call them in our industry. They can expense land transfer tax, things like that. So that's all our very beginning aspects of things. And then we are oftentimes, making sure things are put in the calendar properly. If it's purchase requisition date, obviously a closing date, and the work really doesn't happen until oftentimes a little bit closer to the close of the transaction.
Right.
And that we kind of starts when we are, in terms of the closing steps, when we are, if it's again on a purchase, when we are instructed by the mortgage lender, at which point we get, they're saying, in order for us to go ahead and advance the funds that your client needs to close this transaction, here are the things that we need, you guys to put together and send over to us. And that's the majority of our work when it comes to a purchase. A sale is a little bit more streamlined, the process, because we don't have to deal with a mortgage lender exactly in terms of receiving money, but oftentimes we do need to understand from them, hey, our client is selling this property, and they have to pay out this mortgage that is registered on title in order that it be discharged and clean title can pass to this new purchaser. Right. And so we need to understand how much our client owes, and we need to pay that on a sale transaction.
What I find quite often, and it's unbelievable how many mistakes I find in agreement purchase and sales when other agents are bringing me offers to my listings. Right. I think one of the biggest advices I can give people when they're typing an offer or having their realtor type an offer is ask for a lawyer condition inside the agreement.
Yeah.
And every agreement that I put in, I always make sure that at least the client is aware that they have that option. Especially nowadays, like it was a little bit more difficult, the market that we just came out of, because everything was just going into multiple offers. We were getting 10, 12 offers in on a property. They'd be gone in a week, and you had to go in firm.
Yeah.
But I know I have clients that specifically will not transact unless their lawyers review the deal before they even sign the deal, or how they'll go through the process of signing a deal, get a deal accepted, but put a lawyer condition inside the agreement so that their lawyer could review it. I like to do it because a lot of times it kind of removes that liability from my shoulders.
Sure.
Right. Especially even sometimes when you're dealing with family. There's no way that I'll transact for a family member without having that in there, because if something does go wrong with the deal, it's not good. Hey, listen, I did send it to your lawyer for your lawyer to review it. I think your lawyer should have picked it up, right? And I think you got to get that blame attitude going on, but it does happen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. I mean, the market that we just came out of wasn't possible. People couldn't get conditions with respect to inspection or finance, let alone lawyer review. It just wasn't possible because things were moving so quickly. But yes, if it's possible, for sure, we should have that in there, because that agreement is everything that we have to live by. It's the Bible on that transaction. So if there's something missing from that agreement, then we're all kind of stuck with it, and it becomes difficult to work through the transaction in the proper way.
Some of the things that I see normally is like even sometimes on a survey, right, or having encroachments on the property, or right of ways on the property, right. I think those are important, that a lawyer is going to want to check into, right. Make sure you have full title and full ownership to that property, because if you have a mutually shared driveway or something that, or you have a right of way, it becomes something of a sticking point, because if you haven't inserted that inside the agreement, those things could make a deal go sideways a lot of times. Vendor take-back mortgage clauses, right? If they're not worded correctly, making sure that you have everything with the terms and everything stipulated regarding prepayment privileges. How often, when can they pay down the mortgage? Is it fully open, right? Things of that nature. Simple aspects of an agreement that sometimes could be missed. There's a lot of oversight, especially as a real estate agent. There's a lot of activity that happens every day. Sometimes we're working on 2 or 3 deals at a time, right? So sometimes your days have become a rush, right? So, my advice even for a real estate agent out there currently is, put a lawyer condition inside the agreement, especially within this market where that you're going to have some time to negotiate. Obviously, most of the time nowadays, home inspections have come back. Right, so you got a 5-day home inspection in there, and you got a 5-day finance condition in there.
Right.
Throw in a lawyer condition in there. Right. I think it's just makes the utmost sense in my opinion. Right.
Yeah. No, and I 100% agree. And I'll give you an example in a situation where it definitely could have been helpful. We had a sale that we were working on, and the agreement didn't have anything about assuming a certain agreement with respect to solar panels that were on the roof of the property.
Yeah, great point.
And my clients had to, on account of that being missed, had to buy out that contract, and it was quite costly to them. Now, I'm not saying that if I had the condition on that, I would have necessarily caught that, because I don't, from my desk, from my office, I don't see the properties, right? But to have another set of eyes on things and have maybe an open dialogue during that conditional period, there's more possibility that these type of issues can be brought to light.
Of course, like even asking the realtor, like, is there any contracts that need to be assumed? Like, I know alarm systems, sometimes they could be assumed.
Right.
Hot water tanks. A lot of times they're either owned or they're rented, right? You need to know that as a lawyer, because, if it's currently rented, that new buyer is going to have to assume that rental agreement. If there's any leases on land, right, you got to know what the contracts are and how the leases are actually structured through that process with maybe somebody who's leasing out a component of that property, right?
Right.
And you need to now review those leases through that process. So there's a lot of moving parts, as a lawyer's perspective, and I think one of the real key components is making sure that you got a lawyer who's going to be able to check out all your deals and make sure that you're not going to get into anything that's going to cost you an enormous amount of money in the future, right? And it does happen quite often.
Yep, absolutely.
And a lot of times, when I'm dealing with lawyers hands-on, there's a lot of good communication from a real estate side of that deal, because I think a lawyer does so much when it comes to dealing with that transaction, because title search is a really big component, right? We call it the requisition date.
Right.
It comes quite often, right? And sometimes lawyers get pissed off in a sense that you don't give enough time frame on a requisition.
Right.
What's the average time frame on a requisition that you would prefer on a deal, and why?
A couple weeks, and why for more so for scheduling purposes, just to make sure that we've got enough time to get through everything, because there's always tons and tons to do. In terms of what's actually involved in getting through that, I mean, we could do it really quickly if we needed to.
Yeah. Just a kind of quick, like what gets done through a requisition search, and what is a requisition?
Yeah, sure. So we pull title to the property, the subject property, and we review it to see that our client, if we're buying this, is going to get clean title, meaning that there's no other registrations on title to the property that a seller would have to deal with prior to our client assuming title to that property. So different charges. Sometimes, there could be an old mortgage on there that is dealt with. It changed from one bank to another, but somebody in the past forgot to actually go ahead and discharge, and so it's just hanging on there on title. even though it shouldn't be there properly. So those are the things then we put onto the seller's lawyer to say, hey, we've noticed these things, you got to clean them up.
Got it. Yeah. Sometimes I was dealing with one transaction this year, and the actual seller, so we were representing the buyer, the actual seller had one mortgage on there, but also had some private lending from that was registered, that wasn't registered on the property, but was used as a collateral for that particular property,
Right.
and was stopping that transaction from closing. And then, at that point in time, he had to pay off that lender at that time, and the seller didn't have the funds to close on that deal. So if he can't, remove that from the actual from I guess we would call it title at that point in time, we didn't have a deal that was going to close. So sometimes they're scrambling right at the last minute, where things do come up within your industry, right?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Um, what are the fees like for a lawyer? Well, how much does an average lawyer cost?
Yeah, on a residential, I mean, I can tell you our fees on a residential purchase or sale, it's $1,500. And then what people need to be aware of, and what we make sure that people are aware of off the bat, is that there's additional cost there that's not necessarily lawyer fees, but shows up on our invoices, and sometimes it's confused as being part of the lawyer fee. But those are disbursements. So the search costs, we're talking about pulling searches and whatnot.
Yeah.
Search costs are all out of pocket to us. We take on those expenses in working for our clients, but then that is charged back to the clients. And so on average, there's $500 to $600 in out of pocket expense disbursements. So we try to detail that for our clients as we're getting them engaged with us at the outset of their hiring us. And then there's other things that people need to be aware of. There's land transfer tax. There's different things that people need to be aware of. So it's not just the legal fees. There's an additional thing.
Yeah, because photocopiers, the time frame to check title, if there's any issues on title, the amount of time to work on that, right, is all part of that. And it's hard to really set a set fee based on what your disbursements will be until the transaction is completed, and that number, right?
Yeah, the fee is set in this area of practice. It's a set fee. It's not hourly like some of the other areas of practice that we work through, but it is the disbursements that can be a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on the type of things that comes up.
I want to get into kind of private lending a bit, and a lot of times, as an investor, looking for different types of deals out there and diversify my portfolio. Of course, I believe in real estate as a big component of my business, and many different aspects of it. But also, mortgage lending has come up quite often for me at some point in times, and I think there's a huge benefit to having a lawyer on hand, because there's no way that I would be able to lend out money without a lawyer being able to review that contract of how it's going to be stipulated based on the funds that are given out. Do you do private lending agreements as well?
Yeah, we do. That's a big area of our practice, and and we act for a lot of lenders. So right from preparing the initial commitment, which is the agreement you're referring to, which sets out all the terms, how much is going to be lent, the subject property that's going to be put up as security, the rate, the term, penalties on default. So that's all outlined in that initial agreement, which is the commitment. And then the transaction works through similar to if you were borrowing money from a bank. There's certain criteria that you would ask the borrowers through their lawyer to satisfy. And then there's an exchange of money for secured registration on title to a property.
Nice. So let's get into some family law. Let's get into some real kind of, in depth, because that's probably a real big tough component for you, right? Being having a wife at home with kids, I think it could play with your emotions at certain times, being a lawyer.
Sure.
And it's difficult dealing with a lot of hardship within a relationship, right? Especially when it comes down to them now, each one of them in a divorce situation, whether you're going to represent the wife or the husband in the litigation battle that they're going to be going through.
Right.
When they've gone through the point of hiring a lawyer, you already know it's probably going sideways, right? And it's never going to come out happy at certain points of time during that negotiation, because it is a negotiation, and and when you're negotiating on behalf of the spouse, there's a lot of kind of built up anger that you're going to have to deal with as a lawyer. And sometimes you could become a psychiatrist through the process, right? And
Sure.
and it's hard, right? So because you got to guide them through the process, and it's a long process. This can drag out, quite often when you're dealing with family law. The first question is, can you enlighten the fact of how is that process if somebody is now going through a divorce and they got to now sell that property, that matrimonial home? What's the process of them now transacting that deal or hiring even a real estate through it? How does that work?
Yeah, so that's one of the things, especially in a hotly disputed, let's say, scenario. Even hiring a realtor to sell a property can be a problem. People can say, well, I don't trust, the realtor he would want to use. It's his cousin or so on and so on. And so, one of the things early on in my career, there was a dispute in a file, and we were at court, and a judge said, pick three names, and one person picks three names, and the other one picks one of the three. It's like almost like a child's game. But it works. It's fine. And so
but sometimes don't you feel, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off on that, but don't you feel sometimes, where you get that backlash, the names that you picked, that the other spouse is always worried about what if they are affiliated with that realtor?
Yeah.
Like there's an inside thing going on or something, and 99% of the time there's never is anything that's going on. They just want to pick a realtor and let's get the house on the market.
Yeah, no, and it is born in the distrust that happens when a romantic relationship breaks up, and so there is a lot of it's all emotionally charged, and that can show up in weird areas like choosing a realtor. I mean, I've not encountered a situation where I thought there was something untoward going on with a realtor, right? It's not come up for me. I think everybody's goal in that situation, the realtor as well, they're with commission structured the way they are, they're invested in getting top dollar for the property, like both spouses should be, right?
Yes.
But that's how we typically do it now, is that we say one party provide 3 to 5 names, and then the other party will have the option of selecting 3 to 5. It gives one of the 3 to 5. Sorry, it gives enough variety in the names proposed, and we say people proposed got to have knowledge of the area. They got to be present in the area, right? If it's a Vaughan property, we're not going to get a realtor who works predominantly downtown. It doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So you pick, who are the top realtors in Vaughan, and Nico Pedisano, and then another few names would follow, right?
Right,
that's
course.
it. So that's how we go about dealing with that, and the same for selecting the lawyer to do the closing after as well.
Yeah, and I deal with a lot. I've dealt with it through my 18, 19 years being in business. I've dealt with a lot of divorce situations, and it's never easy from my perspective, because I feel like sometimes I become the psychiatrist too as well, because especially if one of the spouses moves out, and majority of the time it is the husband that ends up going to find and relocating somewhere else because they just can't get along in the same household.
Right.
And it's like when I need an answer, or hey, listen, we got an offer to the table, what do you think? I have to kind of deal with them separately. So I'll call the wife up and say, hey, listen, we got this offer. And she has an opinion of what counterback she would want to sign back at, and what things that she would want to leave in the house. And then you go to the husband, and it's a whole different answer, right? It's like, I'm not negotiating on price. I want, no way, they're not taking this. They're not taking this. And, so now you're stuck renegotiating that entire agreement. And one of the toughest deals that I have to perform as a realtor is dealing with a divorce situation, right? Where if they're not even on talking terms, and they don't even speak to each other, right? Because it's like, oh my God, you gotta kind of reason with both sides, because you gotta be the mediator one, and you gotta be neutral, right? And that's my job as a real estate agent. I can't be there choosing any sides at that point in time. Yeah. For your perspective, you're only dealing with one of the either the husband or the wife.
One directly, and then the other one indirectly.
Indirectly, correct, right? Because your negotiations are now with the other lawyer. Right. So, is there ways of settling a lot of that out of court, or is it majority of the time they go to trial?
No, out of court is where we aim first and foremost. And so the process in terms of getting to understanding how things are to be divided and what amounts of support need to be paid, I mean, that process can happen outside of court. Where any lawyer practicing in the area of family law will know the process and what needs to be exchanged, the information that we need to exchange as between each other to get to that point. And so we always aim to do it outside of court. It is way better for people that are going through this process. It's more cost effective. It is less stressful. It can be done quicker. Where we do have to go to court, and we use it as a last resort, is when people simply won't engage in the process properly, and they're too upset to instruct their lawyer to provide the proper information,
Right.
or where they're purposely not providing the proper information for leverage or to create some sort of anger for whatever reason, or when the situation is just too complicated and difficult that we do need the intervention of a judge. We do need the opinion of a judge. So, we have a lot of matters in court. The court process is set up through a series of conferences with judges, and there's interim steps before a trial. And actually, the statistic is anywhere between 90 and 95% of matters, even at court, settle prior to a trial. A trial is still fairly rare in family law, but it happens. We just finished one last month, and they're difficult. It was 8 days, and it was very expensive for our client and very draining for everybody involved, going to the same room for 8 days and talking about the same stuff. But it's part of it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of ego sometimes gets in the way, or a lot of pride gets in the way, when you're in that disputes. And this is more of a real estate show, so I don't want to get too much into the family law aspect of things. But I think that, if my advice when I'm going into these situations is, hey, listen, if we can try to avoid, and in no offense to any lawyers out there within the industry, but if you can avoid those legal costs through the matter and just get a lawyer involved to kind of, once you've come to an agreement to write down what you guys agree to,
right,
at that point in time, you're going to save yourself an enormous amount of time, an enormous amount of stress, and an enormous amount of money.
Yeah.
And I go through, I understand what you go through as a lawyer, because I'm in the front lines of these situations quite often, and I maybe do, at least 5 to 10 divorce situations every single year. I find that around Thanksgiving, it's weird, but around Thanksgiving, I don't know, maybe it's because they have to go visit the in-laws or something like that, but I find that the divorce rate actually starts to shoot up around that time.
In October.
In October. So I don't know, maybe it's spending more time with the in-laws. I just maybe think that's probably what the answer could be on that one.
The prevailing notion is that it's after the New Year, after the Christmas holidays, because most people stick it out for the holiday season, so as not to upset the family.
Yeah.
For the holidays, there, or the summer, so that between the kids ending one school year and starting another one. Right now we're so busy constantly that I can't notice any pattern in the time of year or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just always part
it's
of
just always part of
Yeah.
your daily routine. And
yeah.
I hear you. Listen, is there a story, whether in family law or in real estate, that maybe you can share with our listeners of a certain situation that's kind of maybe happened for you?
Yeah, I mean, the stories, a lot of people ask us, like, what's the craziest thing that happened for one of our family, or the family law is the sexy topic. But, I never really look at it that way. It's very, to practice properly, whether it be family law, real estate, or other areas, you have to be objective. And for me, to get objective, I have to remove emotion. And that was one of the things I had to teach myself as a young lawyer. So I don't look at any story and say, that's a crazy one, or that's gossip worthy. You look at a lot of situations, you say, man, that's sad, and I wish people treated each other better. But if the world was perfect, I would have a lot less to do, unfortunately. But my prevailing, all this to say, my prevailing mindset when it comes to anything is common sense. Treat people well. Understand that life is short. We're not here forever, and I try to put that onto my clients. And I'll give you an example. One
Sure.
situation, which was a real estate closing we did. I think it was this past summer, and there was things were getting heated. We were acting for a seller, as between the seller and the buyer, and they had some familiarity with each other. And sometimes that familiarity, it lends itself to problems. And in this case, the contract allowed for a certain amount of visits to the property between when it went firm and the closing date. And because the seller was, friendly with the buyer to a degree, and he let him go a few extra times, and the guy started noticing more and more things, and he wanted everything fixed up. And it got to the point where the seller said, no, that's enough. I'm not going to commit to fixing anything else up. and the deal didn't close. And I told the lawyer who was acting for the purchaser, you're nuts. Like, you didn't close the deal over that. We have a big problem over here. And I said, and before this becomes,
Yeah, because that's not enough of a breach for
it
somebody
wasn't.
to walk away from a
It
transaction.
wasn't. The lawyer was
Yeah.
completely in the wrong. And as much as I wanted to, you're like,
You
oh
think
my
it was
God.
so much the lawyer though, or more the client? In that sense, it could be
Combination.
a combination of both, right?
Combination.
So maybe giving the wrong advice.
Yeah,
You know,
in my estimation, a combination. But so I got so frustrated because we worked so hard and this deal not to close. And so I let that wash over me. And then objectively speaking, I called the lawyer, and it was around 5:30, 5:45. I said, I think you made a big mistake. Let's before this becomes a big problem, meet me at the property. Get your client, tell your client to come to the
wow.
property too. I called my client and said, let's all go. We're all going to go look at what the problem is here. And we did. It was a small issue with a fence. It was in the Chancellor area, and those fences, Nick, are 35, 40 years old. Half of them are falling down.
Yeah, yeah.
And anyways, we were able to all get together and let cool heads prevail. And the next morning we closed the deal. We worked something out with everybody. But that was an example and a story of how I've evolved as a lawyer and how my practice evolved. Because Paul, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, would have been on the phone with the client saying, forget it, let's sue him the next day, right?
Correct.
But
Yeah.
I've learned and I've evolved as a lawyer, and I'm looking at situations that way. And so, that's a story where I can share and be proud of that. I took an issue that was small, that was being made big, and instead of making it bigger, I made it smaller, right?
Yeah, that's great on you,
Yeah.
for sure.
So this is how I try to operate my practice every day.
There's not many times that I hear a lawyer going to that extent to make sure that they can help the client, to make them understand both sides, whether you're representing that client or you're not, to say, listen, to take this to litigation, the amount of money that you're going to have to spend, hiring lawyers, and the amount of time that you're going to have to put into it. If you really break down the numbers, is this all worth the battle and the fight to go through that process? And sometimes people allow their egos to get in the way
Yeah.
of certain things. And if you can, let bring everybody together and say, hey, listen, guys, what's the common denominator here? And how do we work this out?
Yeah.
Right. And there's always a way of working out a situation or a certain problem. I just don't hear many lawyers going out of their way to do what you did. Right. Because and what's funny is I'm just going to kind of give you some experience from me as a real estate. And I know the answer to this, right? But I just want to share this with you. Lawyer between lawyer, a lot of times I find that there's a lot of letter communication back and forth with each other. There's no picking up the phone quite often and say, hey, listen, let's have a conversation. Can we work this out? And I know why you guys do it, but can you put some insight on a lot of why there is back and forth in writing, letter to lawyer, and why it's very rare often that you guys would actually communicate with the other side?
By telephone, yeah.
By telephone,
It doesn't happen as much as it should, in my opinion. And I think it is part of our training. It is the cover your ass, the CYA method, right? We have
Right.
to make sure that what we're doing is in writing, both for to protect ourselves in respect of our clients, the situation as a whole, but also to show the clients what happens. And a lot of times clients are can be distrustful of lawyers, and so I've had clients instruct me not to talk to the lawyer on the telephone because they want to make sure that they know
It's all
everything that's happening
documented,
in the
correct.
communication. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would imagine that a lot of our training lends itself to communicating and writing more so, because it's less there's less opportunity for a written correspondence that's there and objective to be misinterpreted. Sometimes telephone calls can be misinterpreted, and then after the fact you say to the lawyer, well, I didn't say that to you, or yes, you did, right? So
Yeah,
and
yeah,
who
yeah.
was there? Just the two of you. So it couldn't be problematic that way. But yeah,
It does drag out the process, though.
it can. It absolutely can, unfortunately. And oftentimes you look at a situation, you say, well, Jesus, opposed to these 4 letters that spanned 3 weeks, a 15-minute phone call probably could have got us there, right? But
It's true, though, right?
it is true.
Yeah, like it's very rare, and people tell me all the time. A lot of mentors that I grew up with, or a lot of brokers that would give me some advice. And even when I was doing my training or getting my license in real estate, a lot of things were, hey, make sure you document everything that gets said and done within a transaction, because if it ever goes to litigation, you have written confirmation, dates, times, all that stuff. I get it,
Yeah.
but there's no way that if I did that through the process, that I would be able to transact and do as many deals as I did, because it would be such a dragged out process for me
Yeah.
that I need communication. Like I'm just an old school guy. I hate text messages. I really hate emails, and now I gotta go every day when I wake up. I gotta go through, I don't know, 50 emails just in the morning, right? And then now I gotta respond to texts, and text is like, this is a long process. Can we just pick up the phone and talk?
Yeah.
Right, and a lot of that is about why I'm a phone guy. I wanna face to face. Even when I do offer presentations, I want to meet the client. I want to meet the agent face to face, because there's so much that's gonna come out of a negotiation. Where I'm looking at gestures or movements, or I'm at the presentation with the spouses, a husband and wife, and I'm looking at how they're gonna react to when I'm bringing them a low offer to the table, and it's not the money that they want, right? Is like, who I got to work with a little closer, and that's all part of it. And lawyers negotiate on a constant basis too, as well, right? Maybe we're negotiating different terms or different strategies through that negotiation process. But I'm that type of guy where I like to do a face to face. Is there been a situation, because I can see, and what I kind of, from my understanding, is a lot of times you can run into some really crazy people. When you're dealing with a divorce situation, there's a lot of anger.
Yeah.
Right. And now when you're representing, let's just say, a wife in this IE example, and you got a guy that's just livid because you are really doing what you got to do for her to get her as much as she can, or what she rightfully deserves.
Right.
Has there ever been a situation where maybe you've been threatened by an individual who didn't like, because you were a really good lawyer and you were just doing your job?
Yeah, it's come up a couple times, unfortunately. Probably the funniest version of this story was one time leaving the courthouse in Newmarket. So all of our matters in York Region go to the courthouse in Newmarket.
Yeah.
And after a court attendance, I was getting to my car and getting ready to leave, and car pulled up behind mine.
Oh boy!
To block me from going out, and the window came down, and someone started spitting fire at me, and I said, "My man, I'm just doing my job, right? Nothing personal, nothing against you. I didn't say or do anything that was offensive to him specifically.
Of course,
he didn't like how the day went in court, and thankfully I was able to calm him down, and he understood. But he still gave me one last F off for the road, and that was that. But I did say, wow. This is unusual. You don't expect that, right?
Well, you're only going to get that when you're good, right? So you're obviously good at what you do, because the guy was pissed off. You got to take it as a compliment. I think you got to look at that as a positive.
Right. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Right.
You got shaken up a bit, but
it's like, oh, you should, at least it gives you some, pat you on the back, man. I just did my job today for her.
Yeah.
But it is scary. It is scary at points, right? Because at the end of the day, you are just doing your job. This is what you get paid to do. This is what you've gone to school to, to help out people get through this process. And there's a lot of people that are stubborn through this situation.
Yeah.
And maybe that person should look in the mirror and say, hey, listen, maybe if I wasn't so stubborn and I was able to kind of maybe give a little, I would have received a little bit back too as well. People need to look in the mirror quite often, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In that case in particular, that gentleman didn't have a lawyer. So he didn't have the benefit of maybe somebody explaining the way things were going and why they were going a certain way. He chose to represent himself, and it did not go well for him overall. And I think added to his frustration and anger throughout the process.
Paul, what I want to understand is and it's just a quick question on this one here, partnerships in law firms, right? And I hear that quite often. I love the series Suits.
I love Everyone brings up Suits to me. I've never watched it.
You never watched it?
I have enough lawyering during the day.
Yeah, I hear you don't want to be sitting at home. It's like me watching real estate shows that like Selling Sunset or Selling New York or Fix and Flip. Guys, I can't watch this stuff no more.
And those I'll watch. So
and those you'll watch, right? Yeah. So it's a spinoff. In our sector, all my realtors, are partners of mine, right? So everybody when you join my team, you become automatically a partner, within the OP team as well. I want to just understand the basics of how you become a partner in a law firm, because it is essentially, you hear that quite often. When I was watching Suits, and I'll go back, it's like it was a big celebration and a big announcement to become partner within the business. So I guess it's profit sharing in some sort. But what are the levels for you to hit that partnership growth within a law firm?
Yeah, I'm happy to explain. So we start out as lawyers in a law firm as associates. You're called an associate when you're there as a working lawyer. And part of a firm, but not a partner. You graduate to partner. So those are really the two levels you can hear of an associate or a partner.
Right.
When you see a law firm that has LLP, limited liability partnership, that means there's two or more people that are actual equity owners of the firm. A different form of partnership is a profit sharing type partner. Doesn't create an LLP. Like at Mazzeo Law, we have a partner of the firm.
Uh-huh.
We're not an LLP though, so it's a different kind of setup. It's the second setup that I described. How do you get there, and how do people achieve that? Through good old fashioned hard work, right? Like anything else. The partner at my firm, Snea Gohill, she was promoted to partner last year. She's been with the firm for 6 years, and she's an invaluable member of the team, and that's something that I have younger associates that I say this is what we all want to aspire to. And because, from my perspective, I want people to achieve partner, because that means we're growing. And as we grow, we are able to elevate certain people and bring in others beneath them to elevate them. It's the scaling process for a law firm. So I'm trying to work all my lawyers up through the ranks and have them as partners, so that I can continue to add associates that they would be then responsible in managing.
I'd like to pick your brain on that a little bit more, maybe off air, and just because I want to understand to see if there's a way that I can possibly bring that system into real estate teams.
Right.
And I think the model could work where you allow your partners to become actual partners in the profit sharing of the brokerage.
Right.
So I'd like to hear more about that. I was just interested in that. It was just a one-off question I needed to throw at you, because it's just something that I've been thinking about for some time now, and just wanted to see if maybe the model worked, because it does create longevity. It does create, growth options for you and the realtor.
Right.
And I think it's a win-win for everybody, right, in my perspective.
Yeah, and a huge focus of mine has been building a firm and building Mazzeo Law as a brand, because similarly, when you start, people are coming to me for me, or they're coming to you for you.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
You want them to start coming to you for your team, not just you. You're a
Correct.
huge part of the team, obviously.
Yes.
But perhaps people are coming in just because of the reputation of the firm as a whole, or other individuals at the firm, whether it be partner or associates. Because I'm one person. My network is wide, but it only extends so far.
Correct.
And once people come for you, they can be offended almost if somebody else is working on their stuff, right? Or they want your time and your attention. And I can grow that to a point. I can plateau, because I only have so many hours in a day, right? So that's, the model does help for that, and it's a big focus of ours, so that I can continue to do what I do, but as part of a team where everybody is the same, not just there's an owner and everybody else kind of thing, right?
Correct. Yeah, and it's a branch off to helping everybody grow.
Yeah.
And everybody wants to become successful, and everybody wants to kind of have their aspirations and their dreams, to get to certain levels, and this allows the opportunity of doing things together.
Yeah.
Right, where it's not individually done, and it allows that aspect of growth and scaling business, right? Because if you do take in an associate on board, and you do have a partner, that partner is going to do whatever they got to do to make sure that, hey, listen, they're taught exactly what needs to be done to hit that certain level of growth. And as a lawyer, it does grow, because they become a representation of the brand, right? They become a representation of Mazzeo Law.
Yes.
And that's a really big business component. And the same thing with the team. It's like I can only deal with so many clients before I plateau.
Yeah.
Right? Because I can't be at 20 places at once. Having the team allows me that, right? It allows me, hey, listen, you're going to go show this person this house. You're going to go to listing appointment. I'm going to go run this listing appointment, right? Managing the marketing and all that aspect. It allows me that opportunity now to evolve and to scale. And I think everybody's, all hands on deck, and everybody wants the same, the same growth aspects of the business itself, and they're all in, right? And it's important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So, my last question for you, Paul, what advice would you give somebody who's inspiring to become a lawyer within the business? I'm sure that when you first started out, There may have been some mistakes that you could have been put in a different direction or in a different path that would allowed you to maybe get a little bit further ahead within life. Is there any advice that you would give to somebody who's inspired to become a Paul Mazzeo?
First of all, I think it's really important that you understand that you got to roll up your sleeves and work hard. And I mean, I harken back to the days when I started my firm and I had no clients, and I was getting up and going at 6:37 in the morning. And at the time, I was living with my parents, and my mom would say to me, "Why are you going to the office? You don't have any clients yet, right?" So, well, how am I going to get the clients if I'm not there?
Yeah.
And my dad was the one who's both my parents did, but my dad instilled that in me, and he was telling me, "You get your ass to the office, even if you got nothing to do."
It's so important.
And I did that for the beginning. I started my firm at the end of 2011, and for the first 3 months into 2012, I ended up by the end of 2011 with 3 clients. But I worked about 50, 60 hours a week. For 3 clients, you need about maybe 4 or 5 hours a week, right? But I was figuring out how to get other clients, how to do different things. I could have easily just, hung around, have long lunches because I didn't really have much else to do. But working hard, I think, was one of the things that helped things get to where they did. Even when I didn't have a lot of work to do, I would use time to read. There's so much learning in our practice. A, because there's just a ton to know, but B, because the law is often evolving and changing, and there's different ideas. And so reading, learning, and finding good mentors is very important. And so, one of the other things I did earlier on in my career, and still oftentimes do, is I reached out to people. Sometimes I cold call people. Sometimes those people that I had a relationship with or a connection with, I used to be friends with your son, and pick people's brains for things, right? And I do that still. I have thank God, a number of lawyers who are always available to me, and I call them on their cell and I say, I just got asked to do this. I've never done this before. How much would you charge for this, right? And people tell me, and just feed ideas off each other. And I always try to make sure that I'm available for other lawyers that way as well. When people call me, younger lawyers call me. When someone tells me, my daughter's going to be going to law school, I said, have her call me anytime she wants to sit down. I'll tell her my story. So finding good mentors within the industry and even outside of the industry, finding good partners, networking, being friendly, being social. These are all the things that are important for young lawyers getting a start.
Yeah, I think it's becoming a common trend. I think I on a lot of my episodes, I end off with that question, just in case somebody is listening and somebody wants to inspire to be whatever profession they want to be and to follow their dreams.
Right.
It's becoming a common trend in the answer. And that is, and I provided that as well. And I wish I had a mentor. And I'm going to say it again. I wish I had a mentor because I would be 5 years ahead of my time.
Yeah.
Knowing that I wouldn't have to make so many mistakes through the process, that I would be that much further along today within my business and my career. And I think that's some really good insight. And Paul, this has been a pleasure to have you on. Hopefully I can get you on again.
I'd love to.
And continue to kind of educate people on what it takes to kind of build success. And my success was built because I've surrounded myself with the right people. And that goes through many different aspects and different fields of what it takes to become, if you want to build a business within real estate, and having a good lawyer is a huge component of my business. And it's a pleasure to have you on my side. Pleasure to have you on the show, and I thank you for doing this.
Thank you very much, Nick. Yeah, and it's a pleasure. Your friendship's a pleasure as well, business and everything else aside. But overall, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, man.
Looking to buy or sell? Call a team you can trust. Don't believe me? Our Google reviews say it all. Put us on your lawn, your house will be gone. TheOPteam.com.